The highly anticipated sequel to the game that Capcom made in 2012 is finally released. I never played Dragon's Dogma 1, but after seeing Dragon's Dogma 2 making headlines with things such as potential game of the year, I folded and decided to check it out. I forked over my $70 and it took me about 35 hours to see the credits roll. I'll go over things such as microtransactions, story, combat, and just the overall gameplay loop that is present in the game. I have not played the first game, but I do think that Dragon's Dogma 2 cannot be a Game of the Year contender. Simply put, in Dragon's Dogma 2, a dragon chose you as the Arisen, and as the Arisen, you are meant to rule over the kingdom. However, there's an imposter who is pretending to be you, and it's your job to investigate and take back the throne. This will obviously spiral into other things, namely dragons, hence the title Dragon's Dogma. Before I mention anything else, I feel like I need to talk about the microtransactions. Yes, this is a single player game. Yes, this is a $70 game. Should there be microtransactions? Of course not, but does it really ruin the gameplay? Not really. Especially if you look at other Capcom games, they're kinda there just to be there, and you can easily gain them in-game. Like this gold key, you can just get them by buying from a random merchant for cheap. These rift crystals let you summon support pawns, but you really only need this if you're getting a pawn that's like 10 levels above you or something. The ones that are on level to you are free, and you gain this currency passively when people use your pawn. Wake stones, you just find, and they're common enough that I wouldn't fly out by. And the only thing here is the port crystals, because you can set one of these down as a fast travel locations, especially early in the game. There's really no way to get these, and fast traveling sucks in this game. So yes, there are a lot of microtransactions in this, especially for an expensive game, but it's not like these are game breaking that ruins the experience or whatever. This also makes me question why they even offer these in the first place. But ultimately, if you don't intend to buy these, you still will have the full experience of the game, which I think is the most important aspect of this. Another thing that I feel that I must mention is that this game plays terrible. My PC specs aren't that bad. I have an i7, 3060, and 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I don't think I never hit past 60 frames if I wasn't on a menu. I wanted to stream my entire playthrough, but if playing at 20 frames per second was not enjoyable for me, I doubt watching would be as well. I was reaching around like 20 frames per second in towns and 40 frames when I was outside of towns. It's just horrible. I'm used to playing other games, mainly Switch games, at 30 FPS, so I got used to like the low frame rate after about like 3 hours. But for those who watched me play for a bit, the first thing they noted was the terrible frame rate. Unless you have like a Starforge PC or a NASA PC, you'll probably have the same experience as me and a lot of other people. I'm not sure about console, but I'm pretty sure it's capped at 30 frames, which is probably what most AAA games on this gen of consoles are anyways. Okay, now that I got those two out of the way, I can finally talk about the actual content of the game. Kinda sucks I have to talk about microtransactions and performance before I even talk about a single player experience, but with a game that's $70, that's a big investment, so you don't really want to worry about like other peripheral problems. Anyways, the story. It was pretty bad. There were a few side quest lines that I really enjoyed, namely one with a Jadeite orb in the checkpoint town. These two people wanted a Jadeite orb for a personal reason, and you had to pick one of them. Without spoiling what I did stuff, and I ended up running away from the town because I made a mistake, and all the town guards, probably like 20, started chasing me out. That quest was great just because of how complex it was, and it could have ended in probably 4 different ways, maybe more. In other RPGs, once I realized I messed up, I would have closed the game, go back on a save file, and do it again. The problem is, you can't do that in Dragon's Dogma 2. Love it or hate it, you can't manually save to prevent save scumming. In games like Baldur's Gate 3, I may or may not reload my save file a lot of times to get a series of perfect dice rolls so I could beat a boss without fighting it. In Dragon's Dogma 2, the only way to properly save is to rest at inns or pray that the autosave actually saves at a good spot. While I did appreciate this as it adds tension into quests and making sure you pick the right decisions and you live with it, it kinda sucks that this type of complexity was not incorporated into the main story. The main story is atrocious. You show up to the capital and the captain of the guards wants to help you reclaim the throne and gives you probably 5 tasks to do to help you take back the throne. One, for example, is to infiltrate a masquerade dance and talk to the false arisen one-to-one. Wow, that's very risky, right? Especially when I can't go back on a save file if I mess up. I have to be prepared for anything. I need an expensive noble outfit and a mask to fit in and hope that whatever I say or do doesn't ruin anything, right? Except, there was no way to ruin the mission. As long as you showed up to the place, you could easily get the expensive clothes for free, and the whole process of talking to the false arisen was entirely on rails. You'd have to purposely mess up to ruin it. Whereas with the side quest example I gave earlier, I accidentally messed up twice. And so the Masquerade main quest was pretty much over in 10 minutes with no pressure at all, which really sucked. Then the overall pacing was really bad. There are 3 distinct regions. You have like the grasslands where you start off with, then the desert, then volcanic islands. Once you finish the main quest pertaining to the capital, the story just speed runs you through the desert and volcanic region so fast that the game was over before I realized it. The main quest line never did a good job of giving me clear options or indications in exploring or side questing in the latter 2 regions. In the capital, there was many people that got you to explore different parts of the grassland region in a natural way, but not so much in the latter 2, especially with how rushed the main story felt towards the end. Thankfully, I forgot what compelled me to look it up, but I did do the true ending, and it was somewhat of a cool experience. I didn't play Dragon's Dogma 1, so pretty much when there was any exposition said, it just flew right by my head. I'm not judging this game of what the story is, because I don't know the context, and it really isn't fair for me to be critical of it, but I am judging on how it was delivered. And aside from certain side quests, the story and how it presented itself was not the greatest. The pawn system is by far my favorite thing in the game. Your party is comprised of you, the Arisen, your main pawn, and 2 support pawns that you can summon. These support pawns are other online players' main pawns, and these pawns follow you wherever you go, and they may talk too much, but they do offer some useful input. I could be walking down a path to get back to the capital, and one of the pawns that I recently recruited would mention that she found a chest nearby on her owner's playthrough and is willing to take me to it. I just have to press one button, and a pawn will lead me to the chest. Same thing with quests. If the pawn has done it before or knows any information about it, you can have that pawn lead you to where you need to be. There are a lot of functions with these pawns, and I enjoyed all the little things that made each and every one of these pawns special. I wouldn't be surprised if other games in the future make their NPCs more alive and complex, similar to these pawns in Dragon's Dogma 2, because they feel real enough to where at times, it feels like I'm playing a multiplayer game. I found the combat mostly enjoyable. I think where it shines the most is when you have a random encounter with a griffin or a dragon on your way back to a town. Nearby recruitable pawns join the fight. The music gets louder, more intense. The huge purple health bar appears on the top of the screen, and you and your party, along with other random passerbys, slowly whittle down the boss's HP. Fighters and thieves climb on its back while mages conjure huge and powerful spells. It's just a very raw experience that is really fun to participate in. To tackle these tough encounters, there are a total of 10 vocations that you can choose from. You are free to change between vocations with no restrictions or cost. You can increase your vocation rank up to 10, and you can equip up to 4 skills of that vocation. The problem is, you can only change them in towns or at campfires, and you can only buy skills in town. It's simple, but it can be frustrating if you just want to acquire a new skill while on the road, and sometimes when you travel, you won't be near any town for maybe an hour or 2. If it wasn't for that, I would think that overall, vocations are very simple and very rewarding. In terms of the fights themselves, like I said before, I like the boss fights. However, with how the exploration is structured, I found myself fighting the same mobs over and over and over and over again. Especially once you get a new vocation, every small encounter becomes meaningless and very boring. It suffers from games like Hogwarts Legacy, where there just isn't enough enemy variety and it becomes very boring very quick. Especially since there are 3 distinct regions, I was a bit disappointed not seeing things like, cactus monsters or worms in deserts, or smaller rocks, not golems, in the volcanic region. Same thing with the random boss encounters. It's not as bad as the normal mob fights, but I do get the feeling of, oh, I have to fight another troll again. The world is pretty big. There are a lot of roads and off-beaten paths. It's even helpful that your pawns can even lead you to places that you didn't really know existed, so that it helped in really exploring the area in its entirety. I think the world itself is very well made and has good variety. My only issue is fast travel. There are 3 modes of transportation. There's the old-fashioned boots to the ground and you go on an adventure, and depending on where you're going, you could be on the road for a very long time. Then there are ox carts, in which you have to pay a small fee to essentially fast travel to a specified town. You may have to fight a boss or a random encounter on your way there, with a chance of your cart being broken and walking the rest of the way. The ox cart system itself is fine, except for the fact that they can only take you to the destination, but not back for some reason. And there's very limited places that even ox cart services, rendering them almost useless and making them into more of like a miracle service. The final mode of transportation is an instant fast travel by using a fairy stone. You can use the fairy stone anywhere and it can take you to any port crystal. The only problem is there are only 2 natural port crystals in the game. You have to acquire port crystals themselves to set them down at locations you want them on. And at least for me, it took me a very long time to get my first port crystal, probably around 15 to 20 hours into the game. Because of this unreliable means of transportation, it really discouraged me from wanting to explore somewhere very far, because I got the notion that I wouldn't be back here for a very long time. And so there was a time when I wanted to go get upgrades for my vocation, maybe buy some new equipment, maybe drop off some heavy items into my chest, but I had to sacrifice time in trying to get here again. It made me very reluctant to fast travel out. It would be better if they added more ox cart services around the world, maybe at least 2 or 3 more natural port crystals, and it would be a lot more bearable, especially for an open world game. I don't want to be discouraged or punished for wanting to explore. So the world itself was very nice, but I didn't like the complementary systems along with it as much. Leveling is kind of weird in my opinion. It could be because I explored early and got the magic archer vocation fairly early, so I got an early bump in levels, but I feel like leveling is almost pointless. Maybe over time I can feel the difference in power, but I never felt more powerful in the moment. The time I felt more powerful was when I grabbed a new skill or ability through my vocation. It could be because in combat, there's no type of feedback or information of any sort. The information you get is health bars, but there are no damage numbers, no HP numbers, no timers, or anything. If we compare this with other games such as Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, for example, you have a visual increase of stamina bars and hearts when you invest in these perks. Especially early on, I had a hard time understanding if what I was doing against enemies, bosses in particular, was even doing anything since there was no damage numbers. And the boss is taking damage not only from you, but also from maybe 5 other different sources. I see the boss's HP bar going down, but I wasn't sure how much I myself was contributing to that. If they added something like damage numbers, even if it's something that I have to turn on in the settings, since I do understand it ruins the realism of it, but it would be nice to be given that option, especially for a new player like me, to know what I was doing was actually working. Again, it would be nice to have it optional, something that can be toggled in the settings. When I think of similar games, I think of Skyrim. I think Skyrim does a good job in making it to where each time you level up, it feels very important, as you are given a choice to increase your stamina, magic, or health by a considerable amount. Then from there, you can increase the skill in the skill tree, granting you more power and options. So by the time you level up, let's say 5 times, you already feel 5 times as more powerful as you did before. I don't get that impression of feeling powerful in each level up in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, I'm not saying add skill trees just like Skyrim, because that's what the vocations are for. We should be given the option to increase stat points such as base attack, health, stamina, weight limit, and whatnot each time we level up. I think having that in our minds each time we level up will make the leveling system feel much more impactful, because we choose how we want to be stronger rather than it being predetermined for us. Dragon's Dogma 2 is by no means a bad game. There are a lot of people that enjoy playing the game. I can see why people enjoy the game. The pawn system is amazing and fun seeing all the creations people all over the world have made, along with how each of these pawns interact with you and the world around them. The combat, especially in boss fights, has an amazing atmosphere, with the music banging, adrenaline pumping, and spell abilities flying everywhere because of the many vocation abilities you can use. but the combat eventually gets repetitive and tedious as you find yourself forced to travel the same roads and fight the same limited variety of enemies. There are even times when I felt like I wasn't getting stronger even though I was leveling up pretty often. Especially for RPGs, I value a good, riveting story, but I wasn't satisfied with the story as it felt very mundane and very rushed. I know I said a lot of bad things about Dragon's Dogma 2, but luckily, the most important factor is that I still found enjoyment in the game. This is one of those games where you can look past these obvious flaws and still find something that pushes you to still want to play more. I loved the pawn system, and that's like the main reason why I kept playing. Even ignoring the clear performance issues and strange microtransactions, Dragon's Dogma 2 is a flawed game, but there is still enjoyment in it in ways that I haven't experienced in other similar games. Maybe not for its full asking price of $70, but I would definitely buy it for $50. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to this video if you like this type of content, and if you have any suggestions for any game that you want me to play, you can leave a comment down below or come join the Discord in the link below that I am active in. See you guys later.